So we're here today with Kurtis Joseph, and he's probably best known for his work with becoming a living God. What's the Offerman book? What's that called?
Black Magic of Ahriman.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was gonna go.
No, it happens. It's all good. It's fine.
But yeah, so I typically give my interview guest, and before I got kicked off of Facebook, gave people these 9 vibration names in a language that I call Lzwvmmh. So if that's for me to share the one that I have for you.
Yeah, of course.
mrkrizsh Kol Eager U Ut Hav Huff Kus mrkrizsh Kol Eager U Ut Ul Hav Huff Kus mrkrizsh Kol Eager Fu Ut Ul Hav Huff Kus. And
nice.
The weird thing about it was that I got all these sentences and stuff, for months, or I'm not sure how long it was. I don't remember at this point how long it was before I got any meaning of anything. So some of that there isn't meaning, but the mrker is sort of a official or a priest in your way. You are a officiator of rituals and stuff, so that's a fitting enough of title.
Yeah.
But also, initially I didn't have the numbers, so using the lunar dates, it's a fourth of a month and that sort of thing. That's included in that name. So the day that people get it is included in these things. So
nice.
What do you think is the purpose of life?
The purpose of life? Well, the purpose of life, I think, is to find purpose. There's a lot of people out there that think that this physical reality is Maya. It's an illusion and therefore meaningless. But, I beg to differ, because in a practical sense, that makes no sense. I mean, you can try and say that life is meaningless, yet if you're a parent and someone takes your daughter's life, you would not consider that life, which has been taken prematurely through physical force, as meaningless. So I think the life experience is really about finding one's own purpose. I think that the definition of Maya has been misconstrued, because when you look at that definition, it is the power of demons and deities to create illusion. That does not mean that this physical world is an illusion. There is a purpose for life, but we have to find it by finding ourselves and stepping into the authentic power of that, whatever that may be for the individual.
Well, like the definition, the Jungian diagrams of the psychology and stuff, the square. Okay, you got the cube or whatever it's called, the mental construction of consciousness. Well, 5 false egos. That doesn't mean that those structures are bad or that those functions are bad. It's but so many of us Westerners, it's like karma's just karma is a bad thing, and it's like karma's neither.
Oh yeah, well, that's funny, because karma is very real. It's just people, for some reason, here in the West, again, they misconstrue it for this Wiccan threefold law: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if you do harm unto someone else, you will be essentially reaping the rotten harvest of your evil deeds. But, again, the true definition of karma deals with being present in the moment. I mean, for instance, we can take past relationships, whether they be intimate, friendships, work relationships, and if that past relationship keeps us from being present and our current relationships suffer, that's bad karma. However, if we take the lessons learned from past experience to enrich the current moment, that's good karma. You're then at that point in time using your experience to be more whole and present. So yeah, definitely. People in the West just have the wrong idea.
Well, I think Wiccan threefold law is actually a misunderstanding of something that Islam teaches, that you're supposed to, that if you're going to curse somebody, you got to be free of that unnecessary guilt, shame, and fear that goes with it. But other than that, it's like you go off to the battlefield, there's definitely curses going on there. I mean, unless you're fighting for just one dude fighting for wealth and another dude fighting for wealth, you're definitely firm enough in your cause to step aside from those three things and curse the enemy.
Oh yeah. I mean, we have to be careful on how we define a curse. What makes a curse evil? We have to understand that the most malicious acts, whether magical or physical, can work towards the greater good. And that's just a fact. It's a fact. I mean, let's face it. And, I was telling this to one of my students the other day. If you're walking past an alley in Cleveland or New York City or Youngstown, Ohio, and you find that an elderly woman is being robbed or a woman is being raped, would it be evil to intercede and stop that person through brute force? No. If you didn't do anything, who would be more evil? The person doing the mugging, the person doing the raping, or would it be you for doing nothing? So I think for me, that's what my spiritual journey has been all about. It's been about utilizing the powers of light and darkness in their proper context to work towards harmony or the greater good, in essence.
Would you say that the meaning of life would vary per the experience, or would there be some overall features? Or
the meaning and the purpose is definitely different, without a doubt. The definition of life is universal. I consider that to be the dragon within my tradition. Some would call it God. Some would call it God and Goddess. Some would call it Source. But life is neither good or bad. It's not something that exists. It's not something that does not exist. It's kind of like the 0 point consciousness. The Chinese call it Wu Xin, no mind. It's the 0 point between -1 and +1, -2 and +2. It's the fulcrum point of all that is, the embryo of all that exists, as well as all that does not exist, because it has yet to manifest. That would be raw potential and power. So the meaning of life, it's a complex question. It will differ from person to person, without a doubt. But beyond the subjective opinion, life is power. Yeah, life is power.
Through the use of magical voice or some other technique, have you ever experienced yourself at, I mean, our, the body that we inhabit, or however you're going to phrase that, as, the rainbow dragon or serpent? Have you witnessed that?
Yeah, I actually have. As a matter of fact, within my alchemical work at the present, I have sort of been transcending the duality of light and darkness and good and evil. Some would say that this would be the beginning of rubido, where the divine self is being anchored within the flesh. And I think that is my goal. It is to maintain that connection, not necessarily to become it, because within my teaching and within my tradition, all is a scale on the body of the one dragon. We already are it. And I'd hate to get biblical, but even the Bible, talks about various parts of the body being part of the body of Christ. We could use that same analogy here. When the finger wakes up as a part of the totality of the universal body, I call the dragon, then yeah, I mean, we are it. It is just maintaining a link to that draconian consciousness. And this is important for the health, emotional, physical, and mental well-being of all that is. Because it's similar to the microcosm of the human body. When cellular communication fails, disease creeps in. And that's what we're seeing in the world. And that's what we have been seeing in the world for thousands of years. Dis-ease and suffering.
One of the things that I guess connects to what you've said is that if we look beyond the Christian context of words like Christos and mrkrizh and stuff like that, you actually, if you say how the Gnostics said it, if you say how the Jews said it, if you said how the group of Israelites before you had Jews said it, it wasn't, okay, it could be a title, it could be a role, but it wasn't any particular person. But,
right.
It's like the same thing happened with Buddhism. There was Buddha yoga for thousands of years, and then, we're looking at individual Buddhas now.
Right.
But before that, everybody was supposed to become it, and it wasn't. I mean, there were teachers that were looked up from time to time, but.
Yeah, and I find that interesting because the very word yoga means union, right? But yet we have all these different sects of yoga, which, they all sort of claim to have their own specialization, and path towards alchemical transformation and union with what they consider to be God. Some are more theistic, some are more atheistic. And wars will be fought over this, and it's kind of ridiculous to me. And it just cracks me up because it's very true when we say the further north we travel, the closer to south we get. If we try to reach an ultimate goal of ascension, such as union with the divine, what happens is the exact opposite: separation. It's a paradox and it's an enigma. And, going back to your first question, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? It really boils down to walking a fine line between understanding that we are divine, we are one, we are all connected by Indra's web, but at the same time, we are individual links within that one chain. So we have to remain antinomian. We have to remain capable of sovereign thought processes, which can effectively contribute to society. Because if that does not happen, the world starts going to shit. And, look around. I think this coronavirus really isn't the virus. The virus is a mirror, which is allowing and forcing humanity to see the disease that it has become. It's so ironic. It's a joke. It's a divine comedy.
Well, so much of the okay, now that we've stepped away as a society from really pseudo theocratic states. They were almost none of them even came close to. They just just have this group of people pray on our side, and we're justified. But it's gotten worse since that point. But still, it's the same basic thing that we're arguing over material culture differences rather than real principles.
Yes.
I mean, just look at the gravestones in some of the wars. They're all fighting for the same basic patriotism, or throwing God or whatnot. But one side saying it in German, another side saying it in French and English, or whatever. Yeah. And I've looked into ancient India, and people literally, there was this one case, I don't remember where, and I really should have a better reference if I'm going to keep bringing it up. But what these two, their rulers convinced them that here were these evil people over there, and we needed to go fight them, and they were against. But if you look at if you translate both in English, their focus was on some loving God, literally a loving God, and they were killing each other over saying it in a different language. But you cross the mouth, you can't understand the people over there.
Yeah, I think the holy wars are in essence simply an excuse. There's nothing holy about them. Nothing at all. There's always a hidden agenda. There's always somebody that is being exploited, their resources being circumvented to fit somebody else's agenda. But, it's really ironic because a lot of times the wars are funded on both sides, especially in modern times, by the same banksters. Yes, since for a long time.
Even three sides being funded by the same group.
Right.
And some of these rulers, you look at the facts, it's like, okay, this guy, people don't realize how powerful some of these people are, but they control trillions of dollars a year worth of tax funds, but they're only claiming to be a low-end billionaire. But here they have connections that paid here's 40 people on the TV right now, you can see, that are paid off by this guy. Another 37 over here, and you can trace some of that stuff out. But and some of them, they just throw you a little cookie. It's like, I saw this thing every so often. George Soros, for example, says something like, here's how much we need to end world poverty, and by the way, give Israel 50 times that.
Yeah, right.
But and really focus on the latter, but just throw that one out there that he, make it seem like you care,
Yeah, definitely. It's all an illusion. Everybody wants to see. This is the problem with spirituality as a whole. Everybody has this public facade, and it's very much prevalent within social media platforms, even beyond the occult. Everybody's taking pictures to paint this pretty picture of what their life experience is for the public eye, so that they look good, right? And you've always seen these family pictures where everybody is smiling, but what people aren't seeing through social media platforms is the arguments and the narcissistic abuse, not realizing that someone is behind the camera saying, "Why aren't you smiling, mother?" You know what I mean? And it's just, it's funny because the human race really has to become genuine in their own skin. They have to be comfortable within their own skin and quit trying to pretend to be something that they're not, because
yeah,
This, go ahead.
whether it's religion or whether it's politics, and I guess even more if it's the latter. But either way, people are. It's the same vicarious nonsense. People, instead of doing what they can with what they have, they're relying on someone else to fix their problems, whether or not that other person's interested or not, or knows they exist. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
but I guess since I'm talking, I was, I guess I interrupted you. I thought there was the time
Oh,
to,
no,
and it
no.
wasn't. But I was saying it's like the thing about the pictures. It's like I've, particularly with my criminal and perverted Satanism programs, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise to anybody that, I've looked in heavily to certain serial killers and that whole thing. And I don't just mean watching like Criminal Minds or something. That's not
Right.
really, that's just entertaining myself. I mean, it gets me thinking, but well, that series is over with. Got to find something else. But um, you know, it's not that those people were lying about. Well, some of them, it's like they wanted these perfect family pictures if they were mean to their family, but otherwise, sometimes, it's like Ted Bundy. Okay, he did try some extreme things with some people some women that he knew, but other than that, he was this nice guy, helped out the police and other stuff like this, and he wasn't lying about that other side of his life. That was just it was off in some other categories. So, but there are these, yeah, I've been out with women. I've been out with women like that. That it's like, okay, well, focus on the relationship, not on the picture for your Facebook or something.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's the thing, man. And this is what I've come to realize is that people that are truly happy are living. They're really spending time experiencing life. They're spending time working on their relationships. They're trying to achieve their goals, and they're doing things to move forward with their life experience. And, not to say that people that are constantly posting pictures of their life on Facebook are completely false. That's really not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is usually if they would siphon that energy further into the experience rather than the picture, they would be more content, more joyous, and happier, you know?
You mentioned deity. Would you say that there's any limit to deity, or any particular gender or something that it would? Um,
I, no, I wouldn't. It's an interesting dynamic because when I'm speaking of the dragon, I see all angels and demons as scales on the body of the one. So you would look at the draconian consciousness, the one dragon, some would say Tihom, others would say Tiamat. You would see that as the source. And then these forms we call angels, these forms we call demons, are really aspects, parts of that totality of vast consciousness, which we cannot even begin to grasp. I mean, we can sit here and list every angel and demon from the beginning of recorded history, but I bet you there's some other possibility in the totality of raw existence that we have yet to discover or even think about to give it a name, a form. So no, I don't believe that there is a limit. What I do believe is that we, as human beings within this corporeal plane of existence, this three-dimensional realm, we have to isolate various aspects of divinity in order to be able to connect with it and use it to enrich our life experience. But when you say divinity or deity, no, I don't believe that there is a limit to that. No, not at all. I honestly think that we as human beings are limitless. We just don't know how to get there yet. We don't know how to be aware of it yet.
Well, it's like how many people that they're told you have so long to live and all this stuff, and then they live even longer than if they hadn't been told that. And it's like, well, just had to prove you wrong. Well, not me personally, but pretty close, but not me.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
But,
and I'm sure we could come up with other examples.
Two particular, more, well, not exactly opposite sides of the world, but two particular areas where it was apparent that the priests, they knew, okay, we're drawing all these things and all this stuff about, India and ancient Egypt. There were definitely people since time immemorial who knew that all these ways that we're depicting God or gods, whatnot, that this is language, basically.
Yeah.
Just like the earliest mentions in Abrahamic literature goes over 1,000 years before Judaism, by the way, which is quite interesting. The ancient Egyptians were actually the first, but the no graven image thing, it was written in hieroglyphs. So this Ibrahim, Ibrahim, you got a wrong H, I guess, because it's the twisted coil thing. But so it wasn't that you couldn't use the letters. It was, that you weren't saying, that you weren't looking at the statue and saying that's it. That was more or less the point. That kind of thing was lost to the point where they had to change the way they wrote the letters and all this other stuff.
And that's a very good point, because you're saying that the way that we're depicting these various entities, these various gods, that it's a language. And that's what I have experienced firsthand through operations of evocation. What I've come to realize is that it's really the filter of our subconscious mind that gives the function of possibility a form. And it is actually our preconceived ideas of that specific function or power which create the form. It's almost like the subconscious mind creates a mold and forms the image within the mind's eye accordingly. And that will change. That's why you'll find some people who evoke Lucifer and he appears as a small child. You'll have others who evoke Lucifer and he comes as an angel of light. Others, he comes in a more traditional devil sort of facade. For others, he is more of a draconian being. And this can change. And I think it changes as we get to know ourselves better, because our preconceived notions at the subconscious level regarding that specific possibility change as we evolve on a personal level.
What sort of things do you think would be hard to do in the name of deity or one spiritual practice, or however one's going to phrase that? Or what things won't you involve in that?
Well, yeah, that's the way you first asked that question. It's very subjective, because within this world, there are a lot of people that will kill in the name of their God. The things that are hard for me to do are, it really boils down to creating disharmony. a lot of people put me in this wicked black magic box, right? They consider me a black magician. And, marketers, promoters, publishers, they kind of do that to do their thing in the public eye. But the truth of the matter is, I am a man of harmony. And I think anything that goes against harmony is hard for me to do, because at that point in time, my life experience starts getting hard. If I lie, it's not that I consider myself evil or wicked, right? But the consequences of that action catch up to you. If I am abusive towards somebody, well, the consequences of that action are going to catch up to me. So I really go out of my way to stay centered at what I call the altar of sacrifice, the heart chakra, man. It's about, for me, being centered in self without being self-centered. I can answer this simply and say, I won't kill, I won't steal, and I'm not going to hurt people. Now, when I say I'm not going to hurt people, that does not mean I'm not going to act towards the greater good and destroy somebody that is moving against that which is natural or harmonious. For instance, there's murder, there's killing, and then there is protecting one's country and kin. There's a difference.
Well, it's like even in terms of magical operations, if you're familiar with Carol Poke-Runnion's work, one of the things that he said in one of his films was that, it's happening through you. So, as the reason why one is respectable to the entity that one's involving oneself in, and but it's like so many people take upon the they give it the Greek pronunciation Gachtaya. They do it in a way like the Ghoulies movie. If you ever saw that 1982 movie, the guy's screaming and all this stuff, and he drives himself insane. But if he was just nice, being among the company of the spirits, I think he would have done just fine.
Definitely. Yeah.
How much time do you think could be spent on a daily basis in spiritual practice?
For me, my life is a spiritual practice. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's what life is. It's magic. I think this is really the problem in regard to people truly advancing on their spiritual paths, because they want to separate the form of this physical world from the function that is the spiritual potential of this physical world. It isn't going to be until we kind of consolidate those two and understand that science and spirituality, this physical world and the spiritual world, are one and the same. I mean, and we're not going to progress. And when I started taking this mental approach, right, what happened was the manifestations of my magic became more intense in regard to creating physical change in this world through my magic, right? That became more grounded, became more intense, while at the same time, this corporeal reality became more magical. You see the grass differently. All of a sudden, you're grateful for the clouds in the sky that aren't chemtrails. You're grateful for the smaller things like, the bark on the surface of a tree. And so Yeah. Now that's my subjective opinion. I could say one has to spend 3 hours a day performing ritual, but then it becomes a burden. But when I say life is magic and life is spirituality, all of a sudden the burden is lifted and people can thrust themselves into the experience with a smile on their face.
Yeah, it's one thing to say to people, okay, kind of be aware of, the moon or the sun or something to some degree, or what time of day it is, but telling people, you know, it's why in Israel they drag you off this they drag you off the street if they can't find enough people to stand in their hour and a half prayer services, because it's like, you know, most people learn to make it a few minutes and go on with their day, but
Right.
these traditions where you have to literally get up at dawn, pray for an hour and a half, and they go silent for a couple minutes at the sunrise, and then they start up again for another 10 minutes or something. And it's like,
Yeah.
no wonder why they
Well,
can't
see,
fill the
but
room.
that's my whole point. Now, why is that? Why is it such a discipline? Why is it such a burden? Because they're separating their spirituality from their everyday life. And that's not what divinity is about. If I understand that if I'm sleeping, that that's a magical experience, I don't have to get up at dawn and pray because sleeping is magical. If I understand that cooking dinner for my child is a ritual that is going to create change for the better, then I don't have to feel guilty for not doing magic because I'm cooking a late breakfast because I slept till 11 and I missed my morning devotion. We have to be devoted to the totality of the life experience. That's what being present is.
Well, I think one of the issues that Aleister Crowley had with the Golden Dawn, other than the fact he thought like the Enochian stuff was useful for more than their small little group, um, was that, all these teachings about banishing the state of bliss and ecstasy. I forget exactly how all that stuff's worded, but it was like, why not carry it, out of the day instead of, you get yourself into a state and then just chase it away because my the time for the ritual's over with. I'm gonna,
Right. And you see, this really contradicts the entire concept of alchemical transmutation of self, right? I mean, we have the negrido, we have the albedo, there's also the rubido, but when we get there, we want
and
to make
I know what those words. How would you define these terms? Because I
mm,
know someone that's not gonna know what they mean.
well, I tend to simplify things. I see the darker aspects of negrido, the dark night of the soul experience. These are the demonic forces. These are the potentials of the Qliphoth, which I see as this world, believe it or not. I have various theological reasons for believing that, but I see this world as the husks, the shell. And I see the day side of the tree as the reality map that we use to fill it with the life essence, which aligns with true will. These would be the more day side forces that modern people in this day and age would call and consider them to be angelic. And then Rabido would be consolidating those powers from within. It's the yoga of the Ida and Pingala, the light, the darkness, the good, the evil. It is undoing the image that we have of these forces of light and darkness, to deconstruct them and get to the raw primal power that is behind the image. And when that's occurring, it's only occurring because we have become divine. We have accepted ourselves through the shadow work and see it as perfect. We have accepted ourselves through our actions, through our words, through our deeds. And we see everything that we have done and experienced has been perfect. And yeah, the process is a lot more complex. But nonetheless, it's foolish in my mind to limit oneself to either the process of negrido, albedo, right hand path, left hand path. I think these are trends that turn into businesses. And for me, it's profane. To me, it's profane.
Well, just like things are beyond material culture, there things are also beyond, only using one particular term. But it's interesting how so much of this stuff people they don't seem to even know what the term means.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could think of something. I don't want to limit my audience by saying a couple things that aren't necessary, but
I mean, we could get into the things like putrefaction, purification, and all of that, because there's definitely a scientific process of transmuting elements and materials, right? But I try not to overcomplicate things. All of that occurs when you choose to evolve, when you choose to expand human consciousness. All of those various scientific phases of transmutation will happen by default if your conscious aim is evolution and transcendence. I think a lot of times what happens within alchemical theory is there is this, in the martial arts, we used to call it paralysis by analysis. It's like all of this analytical thinking in essence prevents the experience from occurring. I think the experience of the alchemical change is more important. That's my opinion, you know.
I think one of the areas that this happens the most with people, at least as far as that's been my perception of what generally occurs, it's like in Enochian, if people aren't familiar with it, they just have a general idea with it, they go into it. But once they start memorizing those tablets and those calls and the language that on the spot they know that they hear this word, they know what it means, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then they the experience doesn't seem to flow out of them as strongly as perhaps it did when it was initial thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So you're saying essentially that somebody who has mastered Enochian to the point that they can write it, speak it, hear it, and understand it, that it essentially becomes not as potent? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that doesn't have to be the case. I'm sure. I'm not, for example, saying anything particularly against Aaron Leitch or anything like that. But there are people that are known in the field that's what they've said themselves, is that things were very open when things started. And I've seen it with magical students myself, is that sensually or visually or something, but when they started to actually learn the calls and stuff like that, then it's some stuff that hasn't been the trend, is that once it stops being that you pick I got my own Enochian book that I wrote over a decade approaching a couple decades ago behind me, and it's like if you just pick up the stuff and you use it as a contemplative reading, or you have a chart and you look at the chart, but once you start having it in your head, but that doesn't have to be. I found that doesn't have to be the case, but for a lot of people, that particular field, I think that's extremely common. That's
You know,
why.
that's funny because we were talking about, three phases of alchemy. Some say there's more, or sometimes some will say that there's four. But that really reminds me of, I don't think Bruce Lee originated. He wasn't the origin of the quote. He might have been. But he said, before I learned the art, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick. As I began to learn the art, a punch was no longer just a punch, a kick was no longer just a kick. When I mastered the art, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick. So yeah, definitely that when you say that in regard to Enochian, that's what it reminded me of. So that's an interesting synchronicity. I'm going to have to actually contemplate that. That'll be a part of some of my contemplative meditation now. In regard to the parallels of,
I don't remember which step it is, but in the Church of Offerman, one of the steps is basically, or is it one of Ozzy Dahaka's 10 points or something, 13 points or something? No, or 10 points. I don't remember. I've got it confused at the moment. But one of it's basically, it's around acting automatically. And I agree. Some of these things are. It's like there's stuff, for example, that I say I'm not as. I keep saying I'm not a good memorizer, and in my mind I'm not. But apparently people think I am. But sometimes there's stuff that it's like, I never say it any other time in my life, but when I go into automatic mode and I'm like, and I can just string out, 30 minutes of this or 300 letters in a row and come back from the experience and write it all down, and which is really interesting sometimes. If you ever noticed that, done something like that, and then you get it written down, and then you see, oh, but you didn't see it until you got it written down, because then you have it all in one place, and then you can see, oh, that looks familiar. Where's this come from? And then you find it later. But going into automatic mode, that instead of some laborious ritual or something like that, it's
definitely. And that's what I'm saying, man. We have to understand that life is magic. When you start to look at ritual as a laborious ritual, as something that is separate from life, I mean, it really does. It's not automatic. It's not automatic. But yet we hear people all the time say things like, well, you need your magical wardrobe. You have to be in your temple space. You have to utilize your magical name. And this sets yourself apart and let your subconscious mind know that it's time for business. It's time to do magic. I call bullshit. Life is magic, and magic just happens. I know some of the most powerful rituals I do come from simply being present and allowing it to just happen. When I'm trying to work out of a book or a ritual that I have written, it becomes awkward and complex. You're carrying around a notebook, holding it up in minimal light, trying to wield this dagger, hoping you don't cut your left hand off. And it becomes not fluid, not organic, not natural. That's what a lot of people need to understand, is that, grimoires are really fingers pointing to the moon. The rituals which I record in my writing are rituals that just happened to occur that way. That doesn't mean that I wrote this ritual out and performed it in that way. The stuff just happens. And it happens by being now, in the eternal moment. And that's just my experience. I don't know what other people feel. But
there's the process of developing something. And one of the things I think about path working, rather than just, okay, somebody could become a slave of a certain entity, or certain master or something, rather than, one, like with the Gothataya, you find that, I found, people think, okay, for this issue, this or that, but if you work the system in around, you end up figuring out, wait a second, if I didn't work in it around, I would have never figured out the stuff that's here, because you actually kind of somehow you end up, what Crowley said about about ritual activating parts of your conscious that might not get activated. It's that, when you work through a system, but if you've worked through the system, kind of want to go around and activate different parts rather than just stick on one thing.
I mean, yeah, I see the logic in that, and it is definitely true. I mean, okay, you're learning to cast a circle, right? You want to practice that you want to practice that expressed through a formula in order to understand the principles. You want to know why you're doing it. You want to know what it's doing for you, right? But I think what happens is somebody is so caught up in whether they're saying the right words when they're doing the bornless rite, or, things of that nature, and it will completely screw up the continuity and power of the ritual. But if you understand the principle because you have experience with a system, you can just express and integrate that principle in the moment in a much more powerful way that is enticed and brought forth through divine inspiration by being present. Having to remember something that is written in a book is not going to allow you to get into a magical and transcendent state of consciousness. So there's a method to the madness. But at the end of it all, you realize that the method is the madness, and it takes you away from your authentic self. It takes you out of the moment.
Do you have any belief about pre-existence?
Pre-existence as in past lives?
Past lives, something before this birth, other than, the conception and all that.
Yeah, a lot of people won't agree, but I do. I guess before we talk about pre-existence, let's talk about post-existence, because that's really how I could come full circle and introduce you to that. When we die, there's a lot of people that believe that the totality of self, the totality of your consciousness, is essentially inserted into another physical shell. What I like to do is utilize the analogy of a paper shredder. Think of the individual strips of paper as the various energy centers within the human body. Think of the paper shredder itself, the shredding of the paper, as the process of death. What are the mathematical odds of those same strips of paper which have been separated? What are the chances of them being reunited as a piece of recycled paper again? It's not going to happen. It's not mathematically possible. So we understand the chakras are layers of consciousness. When we die, these chakras are reunited with the aether, with source, whatever you want to call it. And then after they're mixed together in some other combination, another being in this physical realm is formed. And so there's a lot of people that would say, oh, I know you from a past life. But more often than not, what's really occurring is they are recognizing a part of what they were in a past life. And so pre-existence is a funny thing. I don't believe that our pre-existence exists as a phase in our development towards divinity, and we come to this world in order to grow and move up the ladder, right? I don't believe in it in that way. What I see is divinity coming in and out of this physical realm, divinity being unlimited possibility, needing to understand itself by becoming physical so that it can express itself and come to know itself. That's what divinity is doing through this physical world, you know? So our pre-existence is there, definitely. And we are the ones that are divine because we are the ones with the balls to come into this physical plane and incarnate. And it's an interesting dynamic because we have to ask ourselves at the end of the day, who is divine and who is not? And I think that's an overcomplicated question. The fact of the matter is all is divinity.
Well, one of the things that I keep pointing out, I guess, is that there's a difference in the Semitic languages. I guess particularly you go back to the root one, Aramea, or something like that. I don't know if that's the first one. That's just the one that's talked about the most. You know, the pre-Hebrew thing.
Aramaic, yeah.
But this son of, you know, it's okay in that way. We're all sons of God, daughters of God, that sort of thing. But the thing was, it's like, okay, but they didn't mean it in the sense that you were literally, you know, that God was actually a father. It was is more of a, it wasn't even the metaphorical way of saying it, because it was like, you know, all those YHAL ending names that something belonging to. It's like, it wasn't that Daniel was like the God of judgment, even though the Golden Dawn manual does describe it as that. That's not how you translate the term, but you know, but the thing is that we got to realize that, you know, we're already part of the company. We just have to, you know, wake up to it. I've reminded of a few things, I guess, as one's speaking, is that the Greek, if you're familiar with the apparently the Greeks according to historical records, from what we see, the Greeks had the idea of reincarnation before the Hindus, and they had an interesting thing that kind of led to what, you know, if you're familiar with Scientology, that's sort of where things kind of went, because they had the idea that, yeah, obviously this material world, there's energy and all this other stuff, so basically you died, but what about all the worms and all the other things that ate the body? Are you somehow in thousands of creatures? And I guess that could have been going through L. Ron Hubbard's the one, Scientology. His mind.
Yeah.
We're all thousands of thetans. Well, yeah, our bodies used to be parts of all sorts of critters. We have no idea how many critters, you know.
Definitely.
But and some cultures, the third thing I guess I was reminded of what you were saying is how, particularly among monotheism and monotheistic faiths, you had this idea that before we were born, well, we were told, here's an opportunity. You want to take this opportunity? He's like, yeah, we'll take this opportunity. We can succeed. And, you know, that was one of the things I don't know how I was going to put that in, but that's just a few things I was reminded of there. So we got two questions out of the way at once. So now I sort of know how this you've sort of indicated how some of this is gonna plan out, but this is narrows it down to one, I guess. When you do the right thing, is it more likely to be out of love, or doing good or pleasing divinity, personal enjoyment or pleasure, the hope of the results, the fear of the consequences, hate for failure, or what you would consider wrong, or even those who would fail? Yeah, I think that's how I'm going to phrase this time.
Well, honestly, buddy, let me shift the question around a bit, because I don't believe in a right or wrong thing, like taking right or wrong actions. What I do believe in is doing the loving thing. Real talk, man. Because there's people out there, and they do what they would consider, society would consider it to be a bad thing. But what makes it bad usually is the fact that it isn't loving. I simplify it. I simplify everything by saying, stay centered in self without being self-centered. So I'm doing it, first of all, to, again, create harmony in a relationship. Now, this would create some interesting conflicts within most people's ways of thought, because a lot of people would say, well, all magic is sinful, all magic is black magic, because you're changing and altering the will of God has for your life. But at the end of the day, every individual is connected on higher planes of consciousness by true will. Our true will as a collective is in harmony. So when I am acting according to true will with complete knowledge of myself while remaining centered, stepping up to the altar of sacrifice, the heart chakra, I am doing something that benefits me, but it also benefits those in my community and the world as a whole. This is what the rapture of the biblical lore really means to me. It's really not about Christ coming back to save anybody. It's about human beings acting according to higher consciousness, acting according to true will, understanding that that is divinity. As a result, the dragon lines within the earth are ignited with that draconian fire, and the vibrational frequency of the earth elevates. And the world becomes a more Edenic sort of place. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I do it to benefit me, without a doubt. I do the loving thing to benefit me, but also to benefit the world as a whole.
Well, I did figure, as I was saying, that it would have to be perhaps reworded, but you understood what I was saying. So,
Yeah.
as I've said, back before I, the swatch of people being asked the questions, in general, versus the people that I have had the opportunity to, record with, is a different group of the population. I talked to people in the park for 15 minutes here and there. This is that's the majority of the people that I've spoke to with this sort of thing. I have some spare time. I'll talk to this dude over here if he wants to talk to me.
Right.
Usually he won't, but have you had a near-death experience?
I was diagnosed as a diabetic when I was 5 years old. So I've had a near-death experience in a way But what I will say is that living and dying are synonymous. They're both happening in the same moment. Every 7 years, we're living in completely different bodies. There's this constant process of living and dying happening within us. And then at a more microcosmic level, we understand that we are scales on the body of the dragon, or cells within the body of the dragon. The same thing is occurring. And I would say, yeah, I'm constantly dying because I'm constantly living. And I don't say that to try and sound like some super spiritual motherfucker, but I see it. That's just how I see it. You know? I don't know. Have I had this, experience where I've died and like went to heaven or hell? No.
Well, the interesting thing, I've looked at hundreds of accounts of these things, and there tends to be a switch to a certain degree of how they're going to list this. The category of where they list these experiences, give them another week, and they're going to start trying to say that they thought they were going to go to hell, and it's like, oh no, I was certain I was going to go to heaven. But when they're first asked, most people tend to answer, differently. So it's, but yeah, the thing about living and dying, I don't think that people come. You get pretty close. I lived in a horrible apartment that had mold every floor, ceiling, wall, closet. It had it everywhere. And the
Wow.
local hospital, I set a record at the local big hospital down in where it's either Portland or Portland, Oregon, or one of its things. They'd never seen that concentration of mold in a living person before. So,
Wow.
I made it through some things, but some mornings, you can't move, you can't get up, you can't even see sometimes, and you're like, am I dead or what's going on here? But I obviously wasn't dead, and you hear people overdosing and all this other stuff, and it's like, yeah, you can get pretty close. You can literally. Fortunately, it didn't. That sort of thing didn't happen with me, because I'm trying to get interviews with this person in California that it sounds like they tried to kill themselves and they were like retarded for a couple months, and basically, yeah, they must have lost a huge chunk of their brain in terms of the things, and they recovered very well apparently. Started their own cult, but I don't know if that's going to happen. This person gets angry at me, but I'm definitely trying for that one. But yeah, it just happened, and the miracle behind it. Now, okay, maybe there are miracles, but your father knows where to go find you. Your father knows where to go find you, and he knows something's wrong with you, and he goes running after you because it's like, I better find her. There's something going on. If you have you ever had one of the, not necessarily all negative and stuff. Sometimes these things are, but an intuitive response in that sense. And I don't mean.
Yeah, quite often. Quite often, man. I think we've all had experiences where we know a specific song is about to come on the radio. I experience that probably once or twice a week. There's also times where I know my daughter is up to no good, or she's about to be in harm's way, and I will go rushing to prevent that from happening. And I think the phenomenon is really less mystical than people make it out to be. I think that when we understand that we are connected and we are one, it's very natural for our consciousness as being. I'm sorry?
Couldn't it be sort of like deja vu? Is that our minds are apparently we have consciousness throughout our bodies other than just our minds, and
Yeah.
even to the point where you know, that stuff from old scriptures where the very skins are going to testify. We have reason more than ever to think that's
True.
to some degree, you know,
Yeah.
you know, these are witnessing.
Cellular memory. Yeah, man, definitely.
You know, we're processing all this information, and like I think that we don't almost nobody remembers all their dreams, and I don't think, I don't know, even know if anybody ever remembers all their dreams. So all that
Right.
information being processed in your sleep, you wake up in the morning and I mean, you come across some situation that you thought is going to happen, and then you have that click in your head, and a lot of intuition. It's like the thing that you mentioned. Now, if you were to say, like, if you were listening to alternative radio back in the early '90s, and Smells Like Teen Spirit or Heart Shaped Box or something came on, and you were like, it's
Wow.
like, that's not intuition. You know that it's going to come on several times a
Right.
day. You just got to.
Yeah.
It's been you know, it's been an hour. It's bound to come on. You know.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but some stuff, like, I woke up in the middle of the night, the very minute they said my grandfather died.
Mhm.
And, you know, it wasn't like I regularly woke up and anything like that happened. That was just that one thing. Or there's this one person, either they get picked up by the police or they overdose or something like that. Ding. Nobody tells me. I may get a call half an hour later, but I knew that
You knew.
moment. And it's not like I was ever, oh, I think something's happening, and nothing's happening. If I have any communication with this person or their family or something, I know this was a thing. But it's not like I'm going around guessing all the time. You know,
Right. Yeah.
but a lot
Definitely.
of people like to go around. Sylvia Brown's getting some attention right now because she wrote a big old book, and one thing sounds, but the thing she says at the end of this thing, well, she's dead, but you know, didn't they catch her? Didn't they catch her something like she said, "Oh, I had this information from your dead son," and so, and the guy was in the audience. But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you get a call on your phone from a John Edwards. It's not the guy from the television. But you're like, why in the hell is John Edwards? Why? It's
Right.
like, if anything, he would have heard that I speak against him. Is that why he's calling me? But
Yeah, you know, the psychic phenomenon, it's very interesting. Deja vu is very interesting. I used to suffer from deja vu a lot. And as a matter of fact, it happened when I started really diving deep into dream exploration and lucid dreaming. And what I had come to realize is that when I had these deja vu experiences, I had to essentially pay attention to every detail. And in essence, look at it as a dream and interpret the symbols accordingly. And it just started to happen so much. I started understanding that my reality was communicating with me. Like, you have encounters with strange animals, right? Like a possum comes up on your porch and it just stands up and waves at you. That's going to get your fucking attention, right? So you look that up in a dream interpretation book or a journal, and you start to see that the kind of knowledge and wisdom that it's bringing to you is valid. And that's really, the Taoists were the first to master lucid dreaming, but it wasn't to become lucid within the dream. It was to become more lucid here and now. And so, yeah, the psychic phenomenon, it's interesting. Deja vu is interesting. It might be, the dream could be kind of crossing planes, like we're experiencing something that we've dreamt. Who knows? You know, it's hard to tell. It's speculation. But I think it needs to be scientifically researched in a more effective way.
well, one of the there's this weirdly colored rainbow that I've because I looked into this group. I did a lot of research into this group. I have like 300 something pages written about it. But there was this weird rainbow, right? And basically, the plane sort of thing. They had a little bit different order than a lot of the Lzwvmmh groups and stuff like this. But basically, okay, we're, the vehicle we're at. You can narrow it down to, okay, we got the physical body and the psychic body and that sort of thing. And so there's different realities, but in a way we're operating all these realities at once. And but particularly with the lucid dreaming, they kind of enforce each other. You do all these little tricks where you're like, and to give it my weird little tinge that I kind of do, because I like to experiment with some of these things and see it, particularly when it's like, yeah, they can't. Some of them are passed through tradition and stuff like this, and you want to. But when I don't believe that something's straight up direct revelation, direct inspiration, if I don't even think that's really if I don't think it's preserved to that level, I'll play with it, whatever. Not out of disrespect. I'll just knee-mirrored Ima, and you go around touching door frames and stuff like this, and pretty soon you're. It tells you you can learn, like, okay, am I dreaming backwards, basically. But you start to have the reaction. You're passing gateways. So whenever you're passing by or next to or through gateways, you're starting to notice these reactions, and you're noticing the difference with the dream, and maybe something in the dream, like you're saying, you look this up in a dream journal and it kind of does this to you, but something from the dream affects, so these levels start affecting each other.
Yeah.
But it's not like I don't think it's like some sort of dispensationalist way of looking at planes, as people are going to call them, that you're that, oh, there's a completely different set of rules once you get over here and over here and here. I mean, you don't die in your head, although maybe you do die in your head.
I mean, I don't know. I think I know what you're getting at with that. But one thing I do know is this. The mind processes information. Information is useful. So if we start remembering our dream experiences, and we understand that, like we were saying earlier, all this art is the way we depict the gods, the way people have artistically depicted Shiva, Durga, Shakti. That's really about language. It's subconscious language, right? So this is what we need to understand. Ritual is the language of the subconscious mind. When we have dreams, it is a subconscious language. Our mind is processing information through images. That has meaning for us on the physical plane of existence. It guides us. It's information that we can use to enrich the life experience. Now, it could be true that that isn't true until you become aware of the dream. The dream has no relevance, because until you can observe it, what does it have to do with this life, right? It's kind of hard to say. It's speculation. All I know is that time is not linear. All of this linear time sort of thing, I don't know, man. I really think that in a way kind of goes against Einstein's theory of relativity. I think it really goes against science. So I think when we're processing our dreams, experiencing our dreams, we're processing information from the past, from the present, from what we would call the future. But it's all going on right now. And it can help us to more effectively pull possibility into this realm of existence from 360 degrees, instead of just, here, this is what I want to experience because I take this action. This is going to happen. So it's a little more complex, I think. I think dream exploration is important.
I think it's kind of both. Like, it's not entirely linear. It's not entirely cyclical. Yes. Okay. It's like, Mircea Eliade was particularly, known for pointing at the whole, ritual enacts a myth sort of way of thinking. One of the
Yeah.
things that he wrote down on, sort of connected to I mean, he did. I'm not sure he made this connection, but the Confucian way of ritual being establishing and upholding character. Li and Ren. But but that doesn't mean that you know it's like, okay, you had the time cycles. It's not necessarily that, okay, the martyrdom or whatever you're thinking of. I guess that was the last thing I've watched as far as something secular that I mean, I wasn't there for it, but I mean, I watched one of these things on YouTube, I guess. But it's not like these things happen all over again. But as far as, no, that's I'm not articulating this.
Well, I see what you're getting at, and I agree. I mean, it's not really, I'm neither for or against either way of thought.
Our subjective objective, it's like, okay, sometimes, they can be both at the same time, sometimes neither. Sometimes being, whatever being a form of being takes on is really its form. It wasn't meant to mean anything. It's just, listen to what it's saying. Here's some symbolic element that it's putting forth.
Here's a symbolic element that's being brought to my mind now. Okay, let's look at a TV series, a specific season of a TV series. We'll use American Horror Story as an example. I don't know if you've watched that show.
I'm not even sure.
American Horror Story Coven. It was a specific season within that series, had specific characters, and it was all about a coven of witches that existed within this girls' school for witches, right? Now, within this series, American Horror Story, it's like each season is a story within an anthology, right? The season after that was completely irrelevant to Coven. But then we get to whatever season it was, Apocalypse, and all of a sudden these characters from Coven are coming back to interact in this universe, in this season of Apocalypse. So that's really weird. Like, linear time exists from our perception because there is the birth experience leading all the way to the death experience. However, we have to understand that all of these various interactions that we are having is creating this, I mean, the symbols right behind you, yin yang, the Tai Chi symbol, this cyclical reciprocal movement of interaction between energies. So if time was linear, it would be just like watching a TV show. You cannot really change it. But if time is circular, we are now the directors of the TV show. That's really how I see it. So it does exist, just like the TV show and the, you know what I mean? Both exist.
You can also say, even if it's linear, it's like, what do you think the people who from Paul and after Apollonius had been dead for a generation, and they could actually take off on the movement, and people were kind of forgetting the guy, and they could really start, but look at what they did. They did just what the Baha'i movement did. They said, hey, you can't take this stuff literally, but we have the code. We have the code to figure out how this, and look at these other things that happened. So you can look at what was going on and kind of be the controller of the situation. So instead, I mean, okay, you don't have to be some manipulative sort of cult leader or something like that to kind of, make it all about you and your priesthood and everything else. But you can, we all do, particularly nowadays. It's like the information's out there. It's not like you have to wait for the priest to tell you what's in the Bible. You can pick up any version of the Bible yourself and find out yourself,
Anyone.
or any other tradition. I've, to a huge degree, I agree with what Mr. King, what Jason King recently said in one of his videos. That I mean, I've said stuff like that before myself. That basically there aren't any occult secrets. I mean, you do have. I mean, all the basic techniques and all that stuff are out. People are going to say some Pacific angel or some Pacific profess house or something like that. But like one of the groups I look into, is it really worth spending 20 years in the organization so they can tell you a couple more of the names of the list of 970 leaders that aren't historically part of their group, and what numbers or letters or something they have on their shoulder or their forehead or something like that? Is it really worth spending another 10 years to find that out, really?
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah, there comes a point where it's like kicking the dead horse. Yeah. I don't know that it would be worth it.
I mean, it's, it doesn't really show when you're just going through a book of, Egyptian Book of the Dead or something like that. But,
Right.
when you got, when you actually just contemplate your way through it, and by the time you've done that, you've kind of got basically, gates and password and gatekeeper, really just a stripped down sort of thing, and whatever you miss from the thing, whatever. But do you really need to pick up every version of the book that the archaeologists have had to? Oh, there's this new room that they talked about, and well, I've path worked it, so I really don't need to go back just for the one character in this version or something. So
Right. Yeah, I really do agree. It gets to be about kicking the dead horse.
and
It really is. I mean, like the various, you use the Book of the Dead. That's a great example. A lot of people see that as a reality map for the death experience, specifically the Egyptian Book of the Dead, right? But when you look at it symbolically and understand it as principles that can be applied to go through that experience now, it can be used in a different way. But why overcomplicate it when there are various translations, various means of conveying these things? But who cares? I think if the principles are there, again, it comes down to principle. If the principles are there and visible, there's no reason to make it more complicated. There's no reason to. I wouldn't see the point. I don't think it would be worth it. Not at all.
well, one of the authors I'll probably read more of his books in the future too. But Lon Milo Duquette makes, not that I can't figure out Alistair Crowley, but he even figures out stuff that I've or puts it in a way that I guess I completely miss. That's one of the things that, it's not that I'm conservative that I have to follow this, but it's interesting looking how other people go over things. It's like, you can listen, you can hear something every month, and then someone tells you something about it. It's like, why did I not figure that out? But Lon Milo Duquette, I attended one of his seminars back in 2005, and one of the things he was pointing out was that all the Solomonic temple furniture and stuff. Yeah, it might be nice to have all that gold and jewels and all that stuff, but if you can't get a battery and some paper and stuff together and get this stuff to work, don't think you're going to be able to do it with millions of dollars of equipment. And it's definitely true. It's some of the grimoires, and the disappointing thing about most people and these grimoires and stuff are their world religion text, of one sort or the other. I mean, I have wider variety than that, but they're like, until you go through the whole process and all that other stuff, it's like, no, the ritual started a long time ago. It didn't start, when you finally had the the bloods, which grimoire? One of the grimoires you get, you got to have a bloodstone, and you got to have this other stuff. And even nowadays, it can take you a while to get the right combination of things. And you're doing this process that takes you up maybe 6 months to get to the point. And it's like, whatever material's available. I think somebody privately contacted me, and some of the stuff that's in these books is highly illegal, basically. And some people feel like they have to have some endangered species, parts, to perform a ritual. And it's like, just symbolically represent something,
Right.
How many Sufis said, I can't afford Hajj, so I'm going to, it's not like it doesn't count as a mystical practice. So, to oversimplify that thing.
I definitely, again, it's really about not being for or against any one thing. I'm really not against people believing that they need all of that stuff. I mean, because the ritual does start with the preparation. And
perhaps
like, for instance, and things are illegal in some places, not illegal in another. And that was one of the big issues with black magic of our Imam, in regard to some of the ingredients for the blackened fire of Zohak, which is the antithesis of the sacred fire of Ahura Mazda. And like soil that comes from the roots of a tree that's hit by lightning, the human bone powder, the snake, and the sacrifice thereof. Gosh, that was such a dark point in my life, man. But what I come to realize is that those that don't really bitch about it, right? And they just become aware and present, the elements just seem to fall into their lap. And the results of that ritual occur. But then again, there's others that just use what they got because they see waiting around for soil that is taken from the roots of a tree that is struck by lightning as stasis, and they still get good results. However, I was told by the spirits themselves, this is the way it's done. And if you don't do it this way, you're screwed, right?
And the way people talk about morality, look at how things have gone in this country. I mean, wasn't it just recently that they outlawed marrying your sister in New Jersey?
Wow. I didn't know that. Holy shit, I learned something new every day.
I think earlier in the decade, they were there was some hoopla because it was apparently legal to have sex with your parents once you turned 18, and you can still marry your sister. And there were several states where you could marry like your like nieces and uncles and nephews and aunts and stuff like that. And it's like, people really have to be told not to do that, apparently.
Right.
But my exposure to mythology outside of church, and I mean there was Egyptian programs on Egyptology and stuff like that on the television to see, but Joseph Campbell, back in the 80s when the Power of Myth and stuff started coming out, that was the first one, I think. One of the things he used to say was that everything's evil to somebody. You participate in it. And the thing I keep pointing out is like sin. It's like sin means a mistake. If you don't believe it's a mistake, and looking to law things, it's like, really, you're going to direct your morality in such a way that if you cross county lines, and all of a sudden it's immoral, moral, whatever, and I mean, I'm not saying people should risk their freedom and go and commit crimes or something like that, but it's like, it's like so many of the laws are just statute things to fill up jail cells. A lot of the drugs that are
Yeah.
actually safer than the ones that are legal are illegal. But Bayer needed to make its money. Bayer said, I'm losing the patent for diacetylmorphine, so I'm going to, let's push these let's support these dangerous drug laws and get something 10 times as dangerous for everybody's pain medication. So that's what they did.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and yeah, you're right, and it's traceable. It's really right in front of people's faces. The problem is people aren't exploring these various facets of reality and truth because they're comfortable in their own little box. And even just where we were talking about the ritual of the consecration of the altar urn of the blackened fire of Lzwvmmh, and I just come to understand, that the spirits told me that's how I had to do it. That doesn't mean other people can't get results by following their intuition and being in the moment. Now, is Bayer killing people? Yeah, man. Even the shit that's on the shelves, it's killing people. Tylenol, aspirin. They're saying now those that take Advil and Motrin are the ones that were dying of the COVID-19 virus, the coronavirus. For some reason, those who take Motrin and Advil, as opposed to Tylenol, it causes the virus to move into the state of pneumonia. Drugs are drugs are drugs. And that's really, come on, it's witchcraft. It's witchcraft. Pharmakeia. That's where the word witchcraft comes from, right?
Well, translation of that verse got put in that direction because they were competing. The more modern idea of medicine versus the old herbal sort of thing was taking its place. So they wanted to,
Right. And that's the thing. The drugs that are present now, most of them are poison, whether we're talking about drugs that are bought off the street or drugs that are bought off the shelves.
And you find that it's follow the money, and you'll find out how this thing got passed. That's the other.
Yeah.
But how they're dealing with this thing, it's the same preventive measures, vitamin C and stuff. Same sort of herbs that you could prevent and cure the stuff with. Old 102-year-old woman gets diagnosed. I'm going to see if I can get it treated at home. She takes an extra vitamin C pill every day, drinks some soup, and gets better after a few days. But the people that get drugged half to death with malaria medicine and whatnot, and people are coming out disabled, and they're not even people are whining. It's killing so small of a percentage of the people. You think people would look at that? I mean, what happened 10 years ago? Didn't this thing kill more Americans than we even have cases right now?
Yeah.
So we're not quite at the point. But yeah, watch this thing. Watch all the panic add a 0 to whatever death toll we get. That's but I kind of wanted to direct things away from this. I particularly, I think I have another an interview coming Monday if he doesn't die. It sounds like he has it, but if he's okay, I really want to, anyways, it's way too much talk about the current coronavirus. But the real danger with it right now is all this bleach and Lysol all over the place. What people are going to get cancer from all that, but they say it's morphing because people are not rinsing off their cleansers. It's morphing into something worse. So let's see how that goes. But so I've mentioned a miracle, but have you experienced what you would call a miracle?
I mean, I guess, man, I don't want to sound like some sort of Sufi. Yeah, man, life is a miracle. It really is. I have not witnessed someone walk on water. I can't. I wish I could. That would be so sweet. I can't turn water into wine. I'm not going to say that I'll ever try. So if you want to define a miracle in that way, no. However, I experienced my life, man, and wow, I have grown a lot. I look at how I have evolved and grown since my beginning within the occult field alone, and it's baffling. But when I take it further, back to how much I have grown, learned, and evolved since I was like 15, it's miraculous. It's miraculous. If you would have asked me at 15 if I would be an occult author, spiritual teacher, martial arts instructor, and teaching all of these things together as one comprehensive way of life, I would have looked at you and laughed. It's miraculous. Ordo Dracontia, what I stand for, what I personally believe in, my spiritual method, my way of teaching, it is unlike anything else out there. It literally has the potential to rewrite spirituality as it now stands. That's miraculous to me. And it's not because I'm egotistical. I'm not. As a matter of fact, I understand it as an honor and a privilege. It's humbling. And what's miraculous is that people believe in me. So I have really no choice but to succeed. So yeah, I have experienced a miracle.
So you would see yourself more as like more as in the company of the beings that you work with and that sort of thing. That's you're just you're trying to help other people realize you're not okay, I'm not phrasing. You understand what I'm saying?
Go ahead and rephrase the question.
Um,
I want to make sure I understand.
like you've worked with various beings, and you see yourself um more as one of their company rather than their boss, or than your boss. How would you place yourself amongst that? You'd place yourself like in the company of them, or would you um where would you place yourself in relation?
In relation, meaning in a hierarchical sense, like hierarchy?
Yeah, would you above, below, or would you say you're just what you're
Reciprocal. Reciprocal. It's just like um, one might work with specific deities or entities more than another, right? It would be like you and I talking now. It is a reciprocal working relationship that holds a purpose. But then there's others that you might consider your best friends, or I might consider my best friends. There is a reciprocal relationship that serves a purpose. So I will say I see myself as equal. I'm definitely not above them. I am not their boss. I do not treat these beings like genies in a bottle and try to compel them to grant my wishes. I speak to them and I try to comprehend the knowledge that they have so that I can apply it in my life as wisdom. Am I below them? I mean, I've got to be honest, buddy. Sometimes I might say, fuck yeah, I'm below them. I'm just a human being. Who the fuck am I to say I'm divine? But at the same time, I know that I am divine. It's a reciprocal relationship at all times, mutually beneficial, and it serves a cause that would not exist if I were not here and they were not there, wherever that may be.
well, perhaps a bit confusing, but but a bit less, because I've sent like I sent you before this. I sent you a picture which was the outline of what I did this year. Last year, I'll just put it forward word. If you're familiar with the Temple of Blood,
Mm.
that's, I guess that was closer to the theme that year. So that year was I'm more than a human being, but in a Platonic sort of way. It was like these beings are like, so, I totally understand. I personally wouldn't use the word gods. I'm kind of
Mhm.
iffy about that, but
Right.
particularly more this year. It was like, I don't know if you've ever experienced that thing. It's like you're existing between space, between moments, but it's like, but with moments like that, it was like I was through a door, and yes, I know there was a door on the diagram, but that doesn't quite cut it. But it was like I was in the company of these things.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's how I often operate my rituals. It's like, if things want to take, whether it's a mainstream thing. You mentioned the Sufis. I've involved myself in certain Sufi orders. Not some of the real hardcore some of the ones that are completely, nobody would consider them Muslim, but they are still Sufi. Some of these ones, it gets pretty dark. Some of these African and some Asian groups, minority, mind you. So, typically when things get dark, it's like having a gun church, and some Sufi orders are like that. But I haven't been to any of those. But anyways, it's like, but whatever's attractive, whatever's repelled, I'm going to do whatever. And it's like, it's, you can feel the presence, and other sorts of things could happen. But it's for my purpose, regardless of what I'm saying. It's like, you can, it's like some of that chaos magic stuff that says, they're stirring up energy with all that charismatic stuff while on the television, and broadcasting the Christmas from Rome and stuff like this. It's like, no, just take that energy and work with that. You don't have to agree with everything they're saying, and just go with that. And it wasn't. I tend not to be so imaginative that I'm placing myself behind the Pope or something like that.
Right.
Although learning how to do that at first can be kind of interesting. Like, like the watching TV, and you take the screen and you flip it around, and maybe you want to flip the colors, so on the blank spot on the wall, you're watching a sort of a inverse, backwards version of the whole thing. That's pretty cool to, it's important skill, but it's not quite the thing.
Right.
It's like I've seen chaos magic defined in terms of, okay, you build up all this imagination, all this stuff, but then you let it melt and then see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So you build the form and you let it fall in the just like the I'm my condition is more apparent to some people, or not. I'm having trouble sitting as much through this thing. So, but but when you get work done, and then I'd go on hiking trips that were always meditation trips.
Yeah.
But we would hike for 2 hours, but we just break enough that I could relieve my pain without taking drugs, and throw a mystical practice into the whole thing, so everybody does not just so everybody doesn't get bored. Really, I because I want to take part in the caves and go into mountains and that sort of thing. But combining the two, relax, work out, and kind of
Yeah.
I don't know. Was that completely unrelated? I'm not sure, because I have multiple.
No,
things.
I don't think so. I mean, is it or is it not? I mean, here's the thing. It really goes back to what I was saying before, where the entire life experience is magic. When you're understanding, you'll get to this point in your life experience where you're saying, okay, I'm blending the two. We're working out, relaxing, you're throwing in this spiritual practice. But then when you look back, you realize it's all magic. It's all magic. You are creating a healthier body through the exercise itself. It's kind of like going through the motions of ceremony to get to the end result or the destination that you're hiking to, man. It's
like very
it's all relevant.
very specifically mentioned sleep, and it's like it is so well. I mean, okay, there's waking up and going to sleep practices. Okay, yeah, I have that, but it's like once you realize that you're eating, you know, according to your harmony or whatever of your system or not, or your sleep. Oh, which one did I say? Eating, sleeping, whatever, as long as it's part of it. I mean, you don't have to, for example, you know, you mentioned witches, and Wicca's not quite some of that, but you know, you don't have to get your third degree, if you know what I mean. You know,
Yeah.
I've met people that's like, okay, if you're going to have sexual practices as part of your spirituality, all for it. I mean, I'll even give you advice on techniques or something like that. You know, particularly, particularly if I know that particularly if it sounds like it's going to be legal and all that. Don't
Right.
want to be seen as inciting, you know, because there are laws.
Right.
I spent most of my life in a state that if you know, if you said something like, well, as long as you're in love and the person was under 18, they could put you in jail for a year. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
but you could get married at 16. That was okay. But, you know, you tell somebody and that's, you know, but anyways, but yeah, I've met people that it's like, no, they're using you. You have to have sex with them to get to advance magically or something like that, you know.
Yeah, and they consider that high magic. Yeah, that's high magic. But in all reality, it is a twisted manipulation tactic. Definitely, man. And it's true. It happens. It happens a lot. It
uh,
happens a lot.
Particularly if this thing turns sour and people die from mass starving, stuff like millions of people are already starting to, you know, looking at that end of how am I going to feed myself? I'm actually starting to eat less right now. I mean, people are overweight. That's good for a couple of weeks, but you know, not long term.
Right.
But I was you can call it a prepper church, because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in a way sort of is, because they
Yeah.
really they prep you in terms of discipline and try to get yourself a year's supply and that sort of thing. But you pay 10% of everything before taxes. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be churchy or you're not worthy. And it's like they can't tell what happens on the inside. You know, and if it's all
Mm-hmm.
about the control system, you know, if that reward system's not full in charge, you're going to have slip ups. Like, but anyway, yeah, I you know, it seemed using to some degree well, not some degree, but a definite degree over their population. And now they fund corporate interests like malls and stuff more than they do help people. But they're still one of the biggest charities in the country.
Yeah.
How's
And
that be the
that's what
case?
I was going to say. You know, I was joking on Facebook. I said, the Mormons need to stop their shenanigans. But in reality, they really do go out of their way to help people. They really do.
Oh,
I think a lot of their practices are weird. I really think when they're doing these marriage ceremonies and shit, there's people behind closed doors watching the consummation of the marriage. Like you hear all kind of weird
well,
stuff, and you're like, well,
not that. But the thing that happens is some now stuff is less common than in other situations or something, but the fact that they got this, just like, okay, certain crimes are more common amongst the non-priesthood in the Catholic Church than they are amongst the priesthood, but the priesthood provide this power structure that helps some people get away with it. So some people end up offending against dozens or hundreds of people when they wouldn't have been able to do that without the power of the church. And you know, these guys are just you know, I do agree they're nicer than most churches, and they do help people, but that's overstated considering how much money and stuff goes into it.
yeah. Oh, definitely. It's a corporation almost. I mean, it's really, yeah, there's big money in it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Wow, there's big money in it. Big money in it. And I've been a part of that church, not for long, but I have, man. I've talked to those people. Like, if you don't have a work position that they feel is proper, they will find you one. It's really creepy as much as they try to go out of their way to help people. And the things that they will help you with so that you'll be a worthy church member, you know, um, it's interesting. But I know that when I started reading the various books that they offer, and I started looking at the history of, for instance, Joseph Smith, and I realized that this guy was a scryer. He was looking into his hat, scrying.
Oh,
And
you know what happened? Oh, I'm sorry.
and then I look at the fact that, okay, a lot of these scriptures, we can find archaeological evidence to see that certain empires existed, certain periods of time existed within history. But then when you look at, the Book of Mormon, none of it's really historically.
Well,
You can't.
you can look at the names, for example, and they're sort of altered versions of ones that he would have known in that part of the northeastern United States. Throw in a little bit of Canada, throw in some adventure novels,
Yeah.
and a couple things that he heard at the Freemason Lodge, and you got yourself the LDS Church with a little Baptist and charismatic flavor thrown into it. And but
Mhm.
let's say his experience from 15 to 19 is true to some extent. You really want to take the advice of some entity that tortures you on and off for 4 years, then finally says, "Okay, I'm going to tell you the full story now." Is that really the thing that you want to be going with? Like the one group I've went in, how did the founder and the number three in rank? Basically, they were tortured by a group of entities to the point where they thought they were being. It was like being burned alive and stuff. And then finally, oh yeah, you're ready to be the leader. It's like, but what's that all? How is any of that necessary? Oh, it's just something we do. You know, they don't word it like that, but it's that
Right.
sort of thing. Um, but the thing about the scrying, um, I mean, how do you think I got into scrying? I was raised in that church, read the Book of Mormon every year, and apparently most of the missionaries haven't read it twice. Some of them haven't even read it once by the time they go on their missions. And okay, but and anyways, I wanted to be a missionary for that church. I'm making no
Mhm.
denials there. My studies in Egyptology refuted the idea that he translated anything. But they in that church, they allowed scrying until other people started coming forward and saying, "I got a book too."
Yeah.
So pretty soon there was a couple people saying, "Hey, I got some lost books of scripture too that I got scrying," and it was about time to put an end to that practice. And pretty much
Huh.
after Joseph Smith, I'm not sure anybody had any real deep mystical connection that ever ran that church. Brigham Young had political power, but this
Yeah.
thing, you have 85 guys that are basically just made their way up the ranks. They wanted to prove that they weren't in it for the money and all that before, you spend 50 years
Man.
making your way up the ranks in that church before you end up getting any salary. So it's not like they're, but just sermon givers. That's all they, and claiming these people have these great prophetic gifts and they're needed to, we need living prophets, these 85 people. And it's like, all you have to think about, any one of them, and all of them are, they're overstating their position.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not relevant to me. I know that they can do what they want to do. What's the college that they're affiliated with? The Mormon College. What's it?
They have a series of Brigham Young universities.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, Holy crap, man. Their educational system is pretty cool, I guess. And you've got people like the author of the whole
Oh yeah,
Twilight series that turned into
it's
these movies. They
it's
became,
not Bible college.
yeah, there's people in me. The bitch that wrote Twilight, she's rich as fuck. She came out of that college. She came out of that church. They don't hate her for it. They don't call her a sinner, not that I'm aware of. Whatever. To each their own. Let them do their thing. Um, it's just not for me. That's all I got to say. I know there's big money in it. Big money. Big money. Those people are well, well taken care of, especially in the higher ranks of the church. I know that I have experienced massive amounts of power in those larger gatherings. But I think when enough people generate enough energy towards worship, you're going to, because I've experienced the same amount of power within Wiccan circles, where you see beings freaking descend from the sky. You know what I mean? You see it. That's what happens. We have psychic bioelectric energy. You are going to produce psychic phenomenon. And whatever. It's neither here nor there. This is getting to be coffee cup conversation rather than interview. So I don't want to make it seem like they're right or wrong. All I'm saying is that it's big money, but they help people. There's pros and cons to everything. I think that's why in the East, I take the Eastern traditions very seriously to be neither for or against. Simply observe. I observe that church. I understand that there's probably some corruption there, but I also see the amount of money that they use to help others. And I also see how they help each other within the church. Now, if people were like that to begin with people in their communities, we wouldn't need churches at all. And I think that's the primary message. Who knows? Who am I?
Well, I certainly agree that it shouldn't be okay. You shouldn't have to have an organization tell you this and to be a part of it.
Right.
You know, don't
Any more than you need somebody to tell you that you shouldn't marry your sister in New Jersey, You're right. You shouldn't.
Well, I mean, I definitely I see how that group, okay, it's better than not. Like most of them better than not, but some yeah, um, some groups aren't. Some groups aren't better than not, and it does tend to be some of the bigger, some of the mainstream some of the mainstream religious groupings that you would say that aren't better than nothing. As I'm saying, all these creationist sort of things where you can't, where it's very difficult to even admit that um, erosion couldn't have happened over millions of years here. It must have happened over thousands of years, and dinosaurs were walking the street with humans. And
Yeah. Yeah. And there's always going to be different ways of thought in regard to that. I mean,
well, I mean the way they treat some of these people treat humans is far more of an issue, I think. But yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
And groups as a whole. See, here's the issue, because within groups are individuals. Like, I hear people all the time make statements, blanket statements, such as the police in New York are corrupt. I'm like, you can't say that. You can't say that. You can't say that. Because there's some police within the city of New York that are not corrupt. You can't say that. You can't say that just because somebody is a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that they're a pervert. You can't say that, because there's some people there that are actually through a specific path which they have chosen according to their level of cognitive function. They have chosen it to be most logical and they are using it as a platform to move forward in their life and become a better, more empowered individual. That doesn't make the entirety of the church bad. People will be highly interested to hear me say this shit, but I am not anti-Christian. I'm not. I'm not anti-church. I believe in free will. What I do think people need to embrace is the fact that we have to learn and understand the principles and destroy the images, because the churches are outdated. If we take the principles of simply helping and caring for each other, and it's not rocket science, ladies and gentlemen, this is my message. This world sucks because you're accountable and you let it get this way. And that's truth, and nobody wants to hear it.
Well, one of the things that you know, I myself, I don't believe in, you know, okay, there may be certain beliefs and actions of people that I don't like, but I'm not going about and saying here's an absolute, here's you know, okay, people may tip the scales, but here's this person that's, I'm sorry, I'm losing my words. But it's like everybody living. If anyone's living, I don't consider them a loser yet. You know, there's always the thing, but I don't consider, you know, absolute evil beings. I don't think that there are completely evil beings. That's all they are. You know, and you know, I've picked up these little coins off the. I mean, I didn't get rid of them, and I don't believe this statement anyways. But you know, that verse in the Bible that says, you know, whosoever has violated one jot of the law, it's like they violated the whole thing. And it's like, you know, and then they try to get you with this. Have you ever thought of it? But one of the things that I guess is the big misunderstanding. Now I'm not saying that you I don't think I've Draconium Arcanum, or what was your first channel called?
Yeah, but, Draconian Arcanum.
I watched my way through that one. Maybe not, but I'm not sure if I ever heard you refer to yourself as Luciferian, for example. I myself do use that as one of the titles for myself, and one of the things misunderstood, it's like that it's somehow just like Satanism, some sort of reverse, the stereotype of Satanism is just a reverse Christianity, and it's this big hate theme and all this other stuff. And right. That particularly with Luciferianism, that's not the thing. There's a balance, and you're bringing out, whether you're using the light, love, life formula, or however, you know, or some other ones that are common for the thing. It's not like it's entirely some anti-Christian thing, or you have to be adversarial to everything or something. It's just, you got to, you know, you're willing to be adversarial, but it's not like that's all it's about, you know. But the sense
and you if you want to go to a Christian church, you can, because you're exercising free will and your antinomian right, your sovereign right to do so. So be it. So mote it be. You know, and I've been a part of Luciferian lodges. I'm still considered a part of the Order of Phosphorus. You know, that's Michael W. Ford's first project in regard to creating a specific order of Luciferian ideology, I believe. And we've all pretty much decided that it's essential to be independent sorcerers that understand we follow very basic principles. There's that fucking word again. And that principle is balance. There's a lot of people that find it in very subjective ways according to their own cognitive function. A lot of people would prefer to find balance through different symbols. You know, like we could say um, possibly utilizing principles or concepts from both the left-hand path and the right-hand path. You can do that to find balance. I do it by understanding that light and darkness are one, as based in the Eastern traditions of Tai Chi, the Tai Chi symbol. We all have our own ways of doing it, and that's okay.
That sometimes you have to go to one side because that for some reason you're not comfortable
Yeah.
in this area that you're decided. It's like what I heavily dove into the whole Gautaya stuff is that there was something specifically that I was working through. It wasn't that
But
that I
even
was
even
blindly all
still, you understand that going to one side is not an absolution, because you find light within the side of darkness, and you find darkness within the side of light. Again, the further north you travel, the closer to south you get. The deeper you get into the night, the closer you get to the sunrise. And this is truth. And you're right, because it's never balance. Balance in stasis is where your feet are directly below your shoulders, but balance in movement is a different thing altogether. So in the moment, sometimes you're not going to be 50% light and 50% darkness. You have to be who you are in the moment in the most effective way. That's it. Just be. To be effective. And sometimes you're going to need a little more light than darkness, and vice versa.
It's like a psychiatric model that's okay. They talk about all these imbalances, but they almost never test. And if you look at the literature going back to the 1950s, some of it before, but it was pretty solid starting in the 1950s. They knew about chemical imbalances. They didn't care. They just wanted to give drugs. That's its short. There is exceptions, just like uh, a group that's good for society, bad member, bad group, good members, that sort of thing. But you know, uh, so but when you're taking that balance, the stuff that you should eat, the stuff that you shouldn't eat, that sort of stuff, the experimentation, because it's like, okay, if you look like me, you probably can't handle dairy too well. It's just the fact of the thing, and that's what the doctors say too. It's like, oh yeah, we were looking at the lab results as if we do expect, because they expect a certain level of allergen reaction, as some might call it. That there's other terms they use for it. So I've been tested for like having HIV again and again and again because they expect this allergen reaction all the time, but I don't have it because I'm not consuming dairy. So, if they forget that I don't consume dairy, they're looking at different tests and they'll start testing me for other stuff if I go to the doctor. But I'm going off on a tangent. I'm sorry. The But when you're trying to achieve your balance, what you can do with that balance, you still got to move with that until you get that point. Because it can take a couple months for your blood and your urine to reach the levels that you're going to want to reach. And I myself have been through this process. I've adjusted my lab results, but I was taking up discipline that I needed to take before I could get my lab results where I wanted them.
Yeah, definitely. And it's balance and movement, you know, uh, because, standing there isn't true balance. When you're moving in relationship to people trying to tackle you on a football field, and you are sprinting past people, moving explosively, finding your footing with pinpoint precision, that's balance to me. Because that's life. There's constant movement in relationship to yourself and others, in relationship to yourself and circumstance. And so I approach life like that, as very much a game, a sport, but we still play it to win. So it's played seriously. And
It's like sort of a side thing to this is that it's like animals. People are always trying to judge the animals. They're not intelligent and all this other stuff. And it's like if you've ever played sports and even compared uh, what the professional athletes did. I mean, except for like women's figure skating, I pretty much stopped watching sports. But the if all the footing and all this other stuff, I it's pretty even if they are moving around, it's pretty difficult to see them this time at this time of night. But just going out and seeing the deer dash through the trees and all this stuff, and it's like they're processing the information. They're not.
yeah,
That proves they're not stupid. The fact that they can, you know, I've never
right.
seen anyone run through the forest and do that to the degree that every single deer seems to do.
Well, I would challenge people that would say that animals are not intelligent. Well, guess what? Animals see us as stupid because we need to be governed and controlled to be kept in our place. Because if we're not governed and controlled, we will destroy everything that this world has that is good. And look
And I
around at what's going on right now, and you'll come to see that everybody is based in root chakra. Everybody responds from the consciousness of the root chakra, and it's absolutely pathetic.
hence the hoarding of toilet paper. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, right. And it's the proof is in the pudding, baby. It's the truth. The proof is in the pudding. People are of debased human consciousness. Guess what? Those deer aren't producing greenhouse gases. Those deer aren't cutting down the trees to turn a profit, right? Who's intelligent? I think it's
and
relative.
and I don't know if you ever knew anybody like this in high school. But it's like particularly in that age, there's always somebody that there's a verse in the Quran that talks about if humanity had its way, the world be destroyed and whatnot anyways. Or I no I didn't render that one right, but basically that thing. And in middle school and high school, there were people. If you gave them the key, if you gave them the nuclear codes, that the wrong, if they were able
Yeah.
to get that sort of thing, they would carry things out. Um,
Mhm.
Fortunately, the biggest thing that happened in this country, what was it like 2017? They caught this Adam Waffen group in Florida with a couple nukes. They wanted to coordinate it with some other stuff, and they didn't quite get that. So they had this big destructive plan, but it wasn't quite. Even with weapons like that, you know, they had a
Mhm.
bigger plan, and somebody said, no, no, this is too far, and turned them in. One of them, but uh, that happens with a lot of people. There was this guy in Florida,
Yeah.
another guy in Florida, something much smaller. He said, basically a different religion, and he said, oh, there's a place where a couple thousand of them meet or something. I'm going to go blow them up. And somebody, one of his buddies at the bar said, I am phoning the feds. This sounds serious. And
Mhm.
apparently he was planning something, but yeah, only
Yeah.
only humans go to certain lengths, and then again, animals don't quite see. I don't think. Do you think that animals? Yeah, this is going. The interview is basically over at this point, but so we're basically talking, which is fine as long as you want. But I don't think that animals have the level of accountability as of humans. For example, I think some animals will do something like hump a tree until they bleed, but I think humans have a choice not to. But there are humans that will go and do something at that point to be that harmful to themselves. But
Well, I think, animals, honestly, there's a inherent balances within them by default, man. Animals don't make bad decisions. They simply work towards thriving within their environments. Um, there's a natural balance. The lion is not going to go after the fastest gazelle. It's going to go after the injured gazelle. It's going to go after the slowest gazelle, right? So
And almost always,
the strongest of the gazelle, that genetic code is passed on. And it's like, you know what? Human beings kill for this, just the sport of killing. Even dogs, we have dogs now. It's only because of human influence that kill for the sport of killing. Otherwise, they would just hunt and eat and go about their fucking day. I mean, I don't get it.
and
We need accountability because we need to be told that we shouldn't marry our sister or we shouldn't have sex with our parents after we turn 18. I mean, does that make any sense? I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it.
well,
I don't think I need to. I don't need to get
you look at the
it.
but you look at the animals that hunt.
Mhm.
You know, humans. Animals. Okay, they'll hoard some stuff in some tree or something, but they figure they got to eat something and then they eat it. That's it. They don't keep. I'm going to eat enough for a week, even though that I'm not an animal that eats once a week. But humans do. Humans do that. It's like right now, people are gorging. There's a lot more gorging going on in this country, and a lot more throwing away for food because of the hoarding.
Yeah.
And you mentioned dogs. One of the things that's happened is that we've taken dogs used to perform functions and stuff, and because we're not doing that, actual forms of dogs are changing. They're getting some what you could call psychiatric problems and physical problems as a result of the fact that they've been taking turned into lap dogs instead of dogs that used to do something around the yard or something.
Right. Like sheep dogs, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of examples. Blue heelers. You're right. Specific breeds of dogs were used for, sled dogs. They all had purposes. And now that us as human beings have become not just sedated, but sedentary, as man's best friend, they have to follow suit because their owner isn't doing shit.
Well,
but sitting on the couch and watching TV. It's a
it's
shame.
like, I've not that actually following in one's ancestral traditions or figuring out what they were is necessary, but I definitely looked into the various Teutonic, Celtic, Celtic's more specific of Teutonic, but it's the word for the same thing, whatever. But one of the things is we headed out regardless of the weather. Okay, maybe not in the blizzard, but we headed outside every day. If there was snow, rain, whatever, and we didn't get seasonal depression because we get exposed to enough light by spending time outside getting things done. But now we're, and
yes,
and people aren't even willing to try it. Some people are. I knew somebody that was so bad that actually a couple people that it were so bad it was like they'd get disabled, disabled for a few months a year because during the darker time of year, and it's like all they needed to do once we encouraged them to get outside. They got happier and they got the energy and was able to go back to work rather than take a couple.
I mean, but you got to think, man. Look in these factories, brother. There's no windows. People are working in darkness in the middle of the day, and then they get off work, and guess what? It's dark because they work 12 hours a day. You know what I mean? The system is designed to take us. We are disconnected from nature, period. And humanity has allowed it to happen. I go outside every day. every day barefoot, and I walk 20 minutes minimum. I do it with my daughter as well. I mean, I get very passionate and pissed off thinking about it, man, because some people have no choice. You're right. There's people suffering from severe depression, debilitating. And I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen people suffer from crippling mental illnesses. If you get them to go outside for a week consistently, they completely turn around. It's like you haven't seen a smile for 3 months, and then you talk to them and you see a smile. Like, wow. That knowledge alone holds power, right? It can be applied as wisdom. However, now people have to go to work before the sun comes up. They're getting off after the sun goes down.
Yeah, I'm aware some people don't have a choice with a lot of things.
Sucks.
I've talked to people that have to work 70-hour weeks or just to get government housing. Just to get government housing, they have to work more than full time.
That's insane. You know, and it really comes down to education. People think we're being educated. We're being uneducated. We are not in any way being taught to harness our cognitive potential at all. We are being bred and pumped out of high school for the workforce. That is it. You are being mentally bred and conditioned for the workforce.
Well, I don't know how bad it is where you're at there, but it's for the most part this idea of quarantine. It's not the quarantine that other countries have. The idea of quarantine, it's shut down the recreation and the religious services, and make sure. And even if you have the coronavirus, go to work. But I mean, literally, people all over the place, even coming down with it, going to work, but they're not. They're shutting down the things you do outside of work. You can't even turn in a library book, but everybody's going.
Go figure. Yeah, go figure. Everything that you do outside of work, you can't do, but you can go to work and practice social distancing. Yeah, that's logical, right? Of course, I'm being cynical, but I try not to be. Yeah, man, it's not logical, not at all. But it really is. And you know, that's just one end of the spectrum. We covered the education.
So many times before in history where even one or two people gets an idea and society actually starts turning some things around here and there. It's happened, you know. So, you know, just as an individual, I think society has hope. It's just
yeah, man. Of course.
At the same time, you don't expect it.
I mean, the issue is they hit us from so many different angles of attack simultaneously. I mean, there's the biologically engineered food. There's the uneducational system. And there is the workforce, which people have to work so long each day just to be able to make ends meet that they can't raise their kids properly. So kids grow up not knowing their parents and vice versa. Then there's the media, you know, like I forget what it was. I saw a headline today. It was very dark and sinister, like cities now under lockdown. Motherfucker, no, it ain't. Shut up. It ain't under lockdown. You can still go get groceries. You can still, you know what I mean? You go read.
I make these trips to they shut down the parks. So nowadays people are hanging. People aren't. I'm the only one out there visiting graves that I've seen in weeks. But now people are well, the parks are all closed. So after the supermarket, we're going to take a walk back and forth across this big old cemetery here, or there, or whatever. But so now people are hanging out in the cemetery, which is cool, I guess. Is as long as they let me do my thing, they can do their thing. But
Right.
but yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
but
definitely, dude.
it's like the music, the music and the movies and stuff like this.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like, okay, I have a 3-part theory uh, of music, right? There's entertainment. There's there's the healing music. I mean, it's broader than healing, but you know what I mean. And there's devotional. And of the latter two, you can kind of do that all the time. But the entertainment, they slip the stuff in, and it's like, it's no wonder I've met people my whole life, more or less, that if you know them for years, this is what they're listening to. Oh, I'm never going to act this out. Wait 5 years.
Hmm.
And the younger they are, the more likely that's going to be the case. That, this is where things end up. And if people are just listening to just blitz themselves in front of the TV and everything else, things are louder, raising their than they need to be more often. But when you're trying to create a state with the music, the healing function, I can relieve pain, for example, with the right.
Hmm.
Okay, this song, I'm gonna tweak with the volume here and there and that sort of stuff. But you get done what you're going to get done, rather than just a
Right.
mindless thing. And it's like, how many people that I've seen through the years, they're even more stressed when they have their day off than when they went to work,
Because they
because they
have to sit with themselves. Yeah. Because they have
and
to sit with themselves.
and people get upset too, when it finally gets quiet, because they can't 7 hours of TV on their day off is what they can watch. But if you talk to them after their TV, it's like it's all your they're going to start blaming you for their stress. And I'm like, you've been watching loud TV all day, it's not my fault. Have a quiet conversation or something. But you know
Yeah,
it's happened with different people and whatnot over the years. But
definitely. And yeah, music is weaponized. Food is weaponized. The
and
media is weaponized. Social media is weaponized. It's like we've got a bunch of fucking smoking guns pointed at our heads. And no matter where we turn, we're being controlled and swayed to support a political agenda, which is self sustaining because we are, in essence, because we are conditioned through religion. We are conditioned through the educational system and the school systems and the political systems. We are automatons. And because we are automatons, the system itself is sustaining itself. They don't have to work to enslave us. We just simply allow it because it's comfortable. It's cozy. You know?
well, it can seem that way. It can seem that way, and until you're out of it, then you're like,
Right.
the wheel, the wheel turning. It's not it's your position in the wheel and the speed the wheel turns, and you got to hold of both of that in some respect. But you got to constantly be at it, because
Mhm.
you know the elites programming, the ones at the bottom, both feeding on each other. And
Yeah.
some of the things that you know I had an experience when I was 18, and in a way, if you look at my bio on this, that's you know that's in a way what I consider my birth date. Is I stopped merely I believed I had a soul like my whole life. I believed that sort of thing. I believed that I wasn't just this body, and wasn't just some thought or something. The jiva, as it might be called, versus the atman,
Hmm.
the atman. But I mean, in one way of saying. But some of the stuff that I believe, some of the stuff that I believed in or did or whatnot before that point, really a moment can change life, and you never know when that moment's going to happen, and if you try for that moment.
Mm.
But some of the stuff, it's like, how in the world did I fall for this? But I was being
Right.
programmed my whole life. Family, church,
Yeah.
television. It was all, you know.
Oh, definitely.
No,
And I think I was pretty much left to be who I was, which was an advantage. I mean, I ran away at a very young age. And so I was always left to think for myself. Even when I went to Bible school, man, I did it because I wanted to. I was kind of just, I figured, okay, I've been dabbling in this witchcraft stuff my entire life. My life really isn't great. So maybe I should try this Christianity thing, you know? So I just went. And for me, it's always been, I was always a zealot, go big or go home. So I went to Bible school. And, it was a choice. It wasn't a result of being programmed, but within the confines of that institution, I saw immediately, and they stated it. That's what warned me. He said, Pastor Jeff, the founder of that specific organization, said, some have said that we are here to brainwash you, and they are correct. We're here to wash your mind of all the filthy sin that destroys your relationship with God. He's from Detroit, so he said God weird. I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to do
second
this.
there, I kind of I'm reminded of the God Who Wasn't There documentary. For a second, I thought you were talking about about the same school that was visited, but it's got to be repeated formulas and whatnot, and
Yeah,
having the
most
same
likely.
name,
Yeah. But yeah, regardless, it is programming. And when you are, I mean, let's face it, you have newborns being taken into churches and they're hearing the voices of the pastors, the the frequencies of the music of reverence and adoration, and it's all part of the programming. The sooner the better, you know. That's just the way
Well,
they work.
the interesting thing I found with now I do believe almost everything you can look at and call a religion or what, because the difference between religion and ideology, or mythology and ideology, um, presumably. The thing is, I say virtually all of them have at least been altered by the priest, by the priesthood and the state. Well, sometimes the state, but universally the priesthood. Um, but the interesting thing is they all seem to leave in the clues. Christianity leaves in that clue. You take up the cross and follow him. It's not about calling him Lord. It's about living this thing out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it wasn't quite the problem with the thing, but the way that some of the conservative mullahs and stuff like this are going to be speaking, you miss the point of, like there's a verse in the Quran that talks about Muhammad dying, and it's like, are you going to turn your back because he's dead and all this stuff? But then they make it all about the personality rather than the mission. And here's an example you can't follow, and it's like, aren't these examples supposed to be something we can follow, or here's something you can bring out? And wasn't it taking away all those partners? Wasn't that the whole idea, that you can go direct? You're directly responsible for your spirituality. You're directly able to make that connection yourself. You don't need anybody else to oversee your rituals yourself. But what happened with the Zoroastrians? They killed him, so that they killed Zarathustra to get that power back, because he was saying,
Yeah.
here's the rituals, here's the principles, do it yourself. And they brought it all back. The elaborate drug ceremonies, the 90-step fires, rather than just have a fire in the place. Because literally the thing was that it was cold in the mountains. They prayed around a fire. That's it. The fire, just like anything good in their life, was an important symbol, but they turned it into a thing. You got, just like the Jews on a Saturday, you got to walk so many. You can't walk so many steps. So if you don't have indoor plumbing, you can't take a dump.
Right. because it's the Sabbath.
But it was
Yeah.
great. It was great for my colon therapist father having access to the Jewish community that would come in, because they would cause themselves problems from doing that.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't good for he would give people advice, but when you got to be orthodox, you got to be orthodox, and you just won't
Go
listen.
big or go home. Yeah, whether it's to your detriment or not. And that's what's so funny is most of the things that people are programmed into these programs, they will follow them to their own detriment. They really will. I mean, yeah, everything is weaponized. We are programmed to smoke. We are programmed to drink alcohol. We are programmed to do all of these things because there's big money in them. And then it's so funny because then you look at the government, and especially here within America, we understand that the money's not backed by anything. Oh my God. But it's all about money. It's just, I don't see the logic in it. I don't see the logic in it.
To a lesser extent, the stock market's pretty much close to there. I mean, just look at the fact. Everybody, look back for decades. Everybody who advertises in the Super Bowl and the value of the company goes down even a third, their stocks have risen. Even if it goes down a third, their stocks are higher than they were just because they advertised in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
All these items that are higher because we have interest, not because people can have any real affording power that they didn't have, but just because the interest. Okay, you can pay it over 30 years, so we're going to raise the price on all the homes. People aren't going to pay for their TVs in cash, so we can raise the price of that, and all sorts of stuff. And it appears as if we're basically saying some of the same basic stuff in different words and different examples over and over again here. So unless you want to, I guess we could go through cards of the day and see what's and see what your ideas on that are, or we could close.
Yeah, we could go ahead and close, buddy. We've been on now for close to 3 hours, so I think it's been a good conversation, man. It's been edifying, productive. Yeah, it was good talking to you, man. I'm glad I was able to touch base with you tonight.